Kaminsky, you might know him as Ross Putin, one of my favorite blog names out there. Ross lives in Netherlands. He's a derivatives trader as well as a blogger. He is a regular contributor to Cuban events, and he's written, and his writings have been featured in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Washington Post, and and Denver Post as well. He used to be director at the Hartman Institute in Chicago, but now he's out here in Colorado living in much better weather. So I'm going to turn it over to him. And
all right, thanks, Mike. Let me see if I can get this going and I put together some slides here, and I'm not actually going to go through them necessarily in the order, so you'll have to bear with me. I sort of changed what I wanted to talk about as I was driving down. I think you're going to get a lot of nuts and bolts of blogging. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about philosophy of blogging and then effectiveness of political blogging. And one of the things I like to read on occasion when I wonder why I'm spending all the time blogging that I do, it's a great essay by Orwell called Why I Write. And I've got a few slides from that up here that I just want to go through with you. Orwell talks about, besides the need to earn a living, there are 4 motives for writing. And in any one writer, they will vary from time to time in proportion. And here it is, the first one, sheer egoism. And I'm sure you see a lot of that sometimes on people's blogs, where it seems like they're just writing to hear themselves or to see themselves in print. And again, I think from the perspective of the people in this room, part of the reason we're here is probably because we care about trying to have an effect on the political conversation in this country and not simply to see ourselves in print. I think that's really the challenge for conservative and libertarian-leaning political bloggers. I guess it's not highly relevant, but I'll say I'm sort of more libertarian-leaning than conservative if you read my stuff. But and part of that gets to something I'll come to soon, which is on the liberal side, you find a much more close affiliation between liberal bloggers and the Democratic Party in a direct kind of way. Whereas on the conservative and libertarian side, you tend to find people who are more interested in ideas, less sort of focused on partisan party politics. And there's real argument to be made that it makes our side less effective in actually getting things done, even if we believe we're right in the arguments. So let me keep going. You can read that yourself. I think that's, we've all seen that. And if anybody wants these slides, I can give them to you later. I'm going to go through sort of quickly because I don't have a lot of time. Aesthetic enthusiasm. And again, Orwell is coming more from the point of view of someone who writes books. But still, he's talking about someone who approaches writing more as an artist. And I think a lot of us also, when we write, we sort of feel that way from time to time. But probably in this room, that's not the single biggest motivating factor. Historical impulse, desire to see things as they are, to find out facts and store them up for the use of posterity. Again, sort of relevant. Uh-oh, I've lost something here. Looks like... Where's Ken? All right. Well, look, I'll keep going while we work on this. So bear with me here. I've got the slides printed out just in case this happens. So the most important function or reason that Orwell suggests for why he writes is political purpose. And he says, using the word political in the widest possible sense, desire to push the world in a certain direction, to alter other people's idea of the kind of society that they should strive after. And again, he comes from the point of view of a book writer. Coming back up. He says, no book is genuinely free from political bias. And he says, the opinion that art should have nothing to do with politics is itself a political attitude. Now, Orwell is far from a political hero of mine. He was he was basically a socialist, but he was a very effective writer. And I think the key that I want to get to is the whole idea of effectiveness. news. If you look at website traffic, there's been a substantial improvement. When this comes up, I will show you some slides, but there's been a substantial improvement in the amount of web traffic on conservative and libertarian sites versus sort of the early years of internet popularity. Still, the biggest sites that have the most traffic, well, it's the Drudge Report now, I think, has moved up to be #1 of the sites they call sort of news, believe it or not, and Drudge is conservative leaning. But of the sites that you think of as more political, you have to go quite a long way in the list of the top sites to get to a conservative site. The top sites are Huffington Post, Daily Kos, Talking Points Memo, Democratic Underground, MyDD, all very liberal sites. There's, Newsbusters is in the top group, and that's sort of conservative leaning. Then you get to Drudge and Red State and National Review Online. And one thing that I found very interesting with this stuff is looking at the money these guys make. I was looking at the ads, and again, when we get the slides up, I can show you some screenshots of some of these sites. There's an interesting difference in the advertising on the conservative sites versus the liberal sites. The conservative sites, you tend to see ads for books, for example, or maybe a political candidate. On the liberal sites, in fact, I won't even tell you what it is. I'll just show you when it comes up, because it's so good. It's really something to watch. Let's see. This is almost up. Let me just hang on a second, because I want to show you this stuff on the screen, talking about. I have an article from mydd.com which describes the point of view of a successful liberal blogger talking about why he thinks conservative blogs have a lot of trouble being effective. And it's very interesting. Let me just give me a second here for this to come on. Sorry about that. All right, well, I'm going to start talking about it. Hopefully this will come up. So, what he talks about, this guy from mydd.com, he says, perhaps the low stickiness of right-wing sites, and stickiness means people staying on a site for a long time. If a site is very sticky, people will go to it, stay on that site, go to lots of different pages on that site before leaving. A site that's less sticky, you go there, you read something, and you leave. And one measure of that is what they call average page views on a site. How many pages does the average viewer go to when they go to a site? So I printed out this guy's note. Perhaps the low stickiness allows a single story to dominate their discussions more than hour by hour. He means left-wing sites. High stickiness would ever allow. And he talks about how, in particular with Drudge, and he is writing this right after the Dan Rather thing, where conservative blogs basically got Dan Rather fired for using a fraudulent document about George Bush's military service. So what he says is that conservative blogs are pretty good at getting a story sort of into mainstream media, maybe getting talked about a little bit on the news, but it's the only thing the right-wing blogosphere can do. That's what he says. And I think, you know, this is a few years old, but he's pretty much on target, and this is what we need to change. Of the things that we can do, again, we as the liberals in this case, that they can't, most importantly, they seemingly have no influence whatsoever over Republicans, at least compared to the influence that we have over Democrats. In the end, they are just media activists, while we are media, electoral, and partisan activists. I think this is critically important, because again, in going back to Orwell, while we write, unless we're in this group that writes for ego, then